All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here with today's topic. First off, I want to welcome everybody to our Better Business Workshop series presented by Heartland Workforce Solutions. My name is Stan Odenthal. I am the Director of Business Relations for Heartland Workforce Solutions. I'll be one of the hosts here today, along with Jasmine Cabrera, who is our new Business Service Coordinator. So today's topic is a good one. It's fostering a workplace that is welcoming to neurodiversity. Our presenter is Marcia Prideaux, and we'll get to that in just a second, but we wanted to make sure we included some conversation about some of the great services that are available through Heartland Workforce Solutions in addition to these regular webinars. So let me do that. For many of you, you may already know, but Heartland Workforce Solutions, we have a service area of Douglas County, Washington County, and Sarpy County. We are the recipient of a lot of the federal funds for workforce development to serve folks in those areas. So we have a number of training programs to help connect job seekers with businesses that are hiring. And so that may involve things like, resume preparation or job seeker assistance, helping, find available jobs, but it may also involve some upskilling and helping people get involved in training programs and things like that. And then also working with those businesses on the other side of things. And so we do a number of things, including hosting career fairs and all kinds of events to help make those connections. So we do have a lot of great services, and we encourage you to connect with us as you're in need of those services. Again, we work with businesses, we work with job seekers. At our primary location on 57th and Ames, we've got over 15 partner programs on site there. All kinds of community partners, nonprofits, as well as workforce development programs. One thing that I wanted to highlight here today is we do have a business registration form. So if you're interested in some of these services, and these services are free of charge because we are federally funded with these services, feel free to connect with us on our website here and fill out that form, and somebody will be in contact with you very quickly to talk about all of the great ways that you can connect with Heartland Workforce Solutions and its partners. I also have a QR code on this slide in case you want to scan that and connect directly to that registration form. You can also follow us on social media. How can they do that, Jasmine?
It's quite simple. If you guys just want to go onto our page, and there's some really cool, easy links at the top. We also just started an Instagram and TikTok page. So if you guys happen to have that and want to give us a follow, we'll follow you back. And I'll put the link also for our website in the chat. So you can just click it and follow us.
All right, so so definitely do that. Follow us on all of those social media channels. We just barely started the TikTok account last week, so we don't have too many videos up there yet, but those dance moves are coming. I feel like they're on their way. So you can find us again at that 57th and Ames location. Here's what the building looks like. We also have a number of rooms available for businesses to utilize for hiring purposes or for meeting purposes. Just contact us and we can let you know how to reserve those rooms as well. So in addition to this workshop this month, in the next few months, we're going to have a number of great topics. Next month, we've got one related to opportunities of hiring justice-involved individuals. In August, we've got a topic related to salary and benefits in the Omaha area, making sure that businesses are understanding what their competition is paying, what benefits are being offered, and how they can stay competitive. And then September is when it's focused on federal contractors and what it takes to become a federal contractor, as well as staying in compliance as a federal contractor. So lots of good topics coming up. Again, these are on the third Thursday of every month at 1 p.m. And so with that, I will stop sharing. And I do want to ask one quick question here, actually two quick questions before we hand it over to Marcia. The first one is this your first time attending a business workshop with us? Okay. So some yes, some no. And then the next question. What is your personal experience with autism? Since the topic today is going to deal quite a bit with autism, there's a few categories here. First one is I am closely affected. Someone close to me has autism. Second one is an acquaintance of mine is closely affected. Third one is I have known people in the past affected by autism. And the fourth category is I have never known anyone with autism. Give you a couple more seconds to answer the poll question. And we'll end that poll and I'll share some of the results. And so most people are answering, yeah, kind of the first three options, a little bit of a mix of everybody. So hopefully that helps you a little bit, Marcia, with the background of the folks that are presenting today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Marcia Prideaux and let her get started with this presentation. So thanks, Marcia.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And thanks for inviting me to do this. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some information about people with neurodiversities. Autism is what I know, so that's what I'll be talking about mostly. You know, a lot of the things that I'm talking about as far as autism apply to many other of the neurodiversities. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here and get started.
And just let me know when you want me to launch that other poll question. And then also, as you guys have questions, please put those questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll make sure all those questions get answered.
Yeah, so again, thank you for having me. My name is Marcia Prideaux. I'm with Autism Action Partnership. I'm the program manager for the Prosper Workforce Services program. So we work with individuals on the autism spectrum and helping them find employment, supporting them during their employment, connecting employers with the right jobs to the right people who happen to have autism but are highly qualified individuals. So what we hope to do here today is really to just to create understanding. We know that understanding leads to acceptance, and acceptance is what creates a welcoming workplace for people of all sorts. So you might notice the language that I use as I go through to talk about people with autism or neurodiversities. There's a person first philosophy, which basically means to identify the person before the condition. We don't want to define the person by their condition. So I typically try to avoid saying autistic person, and I'll generally say a person affected by autism or a person on the spectrum. Yeah, and I won't go through too much of our commercial, but Autism Action Partnership, really our goal is just to improve the quality of lives of people affected by autism, whether it's the individual or their families, or even the people in the community, employers, employing people with autism. So we fill in the gaps for services. We have some independent living training that we provide. We also have my program that is a workforce program for people with autism, but also through education in the community. That's a large part of what we do because we know that understanding leads to acceptance. And that's the ultimate goal, really, is to make sure that everyone understands and accepts people with neurodiversities, including people on the autism spectrum. So thanks for attending today to get a better understanding. And I'll add that a workplace that's accepting of people with neurodiversities means that the workforce would also have an understanding. So I do extend this kind of training to all of your employees as well. And so I mentioned today I'm going to talk about autism spectrum disorder because that is what I know. ASD is considered to be a neurodiversity in and of itself. But those who are affected with autism are also oftentimes diagnosed with other conditions that are considered neurodivergent, and we'll look at some of those. So while the information that I'm sharing applies to people with ASD, it also applies to many other neurodiversities. And so I guess when I'm talking about autism, I'm also talking about other neurodiversities, so keep that in mind. And I'm going to share some facts and characteristics about autism. Those are obviously going to be specific. The characteristics of that they present differently in different settings. So I'll try to give you a sense of kind of the unique experiences of people with autism. And I'm also going to share some best practices for interacting, communicating, supporting employees on the spectrum. So I like this image about neurodiversity. And so I guess just to give some overview of neurodiversity, it's a relatively new term that basically just means someone who thinks differently from the majority, or the way that the majority of people would expect. So the majority of people is usually referred to as neurotypical, and those who don't think in the same way as the majority are the neurodiverse. So this image I really like. It does come from the UK, where the services that they provide in their, I guess, integration of autism into the community at large is they're a little bit ahead of us. So in this image, they do refer to autism spectrum disorders, what we call it. They call it autism spectrum condition. And so you'll see it here as ASC rather than ASD. But this gives a good idea of the number of different conditions that are considered neurodiversities. And I like this image because it overlaps to kind of show that, people are diagnosed with multiple conditions that are listed here. Oftentimes, people with autism spectrum disorder also have dyslexia. They also have ADHD. Frequently, there's mental health issues involved. The other reason that I like this image is because it also shows the abilities and the strengths of people with neurodiversities. So those that have a hyper focus are able to, really pay attention and accomplish tasks quickly. Those who think differently, like those with ASD, usually are the people who recognize patterns. Errors pop right out to them. They are more innovative in their thinking a lot of times than the neurotypical person. So I just really like this image to give a sense of the different types of neurodiversities, the fact that they overlap, and that they all come with a set of strengths. So some things about autism. Just last year, the CDC released some new information about the incidence of rates for autism. It increased to 1 in 44. So 1 in 44 children are now being diagnosed with autism. That's 2% of the population. So if you have 100 employees, that means 2 of them probably have autism. Whether or not it's been diagnosed and whether or not it's been disclosed, they're there. And then considering, the population that's considered neurodiverse, that means that there's, just that many more people that are probably affected within your workplace. So we do know that 4 times as many boys as girls are diagnosed. That's being addressed. It probably has more to do. It's not because more boys have autism. It's because the evaluations are normed to boys, we think. Same for people of color, often diagnosed with less incidence. And so it's probably the same thing. It's having more to do with the norming of the evaluations than it does with the incidence. There is no real medical test to detect autism. I'll talk a little bit about how diagnoses are made, but there isn't a test or a blood test or a genetic test that you can do. We do think it is genetic. We work with families where multiple people in the family are affected. And there is no cure, at least as of right now. And really, it's just a way of processing the world differently. So there's not likely to be a cure, or nothing that needs to be cured, I would even say. We do know that early interventions lead to better outcomes, though. So, people who are neurodiverse have to function in a neurotypical world. And so oftentimes behavior interventions help them to adjust because they're the ones who have to adjust. And hopefully we can do some adjusting just through understanding as well. So about how autism is diagnosed. Sorry about that. There are really only two necessary factors in diagnosing autism spectrum disorder. One of them is they have social or communication impairments. So they have difficulty interacting socially, and that can manifest in a number of different ways. Oftentimes they come across as being awkward or quirky. Sometimes they might not want to talk at all, and sometimes they lack a filter and talk too much. So it's really just a lack of understanding how to interact socially. And the second factor is there needs to be some sort of restricted or repetitive behavior. So oftentimes this looks a little bit like OCD. Certain things have to be done a certain way or in a certain order. It can also be food sensitivities, that there's just certain things a person will eat and certain things they will not eat. That it can have to do with their sensory sensitivities, so they will avoid places that are loud or places that have a lot going on. So that has to do with restricted behavior. But again, it can manifest in a lot of different ways. There's a quote here that says, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because it is a spectrum. There's different characteristics that manifest in different ways and to varying degrees in different people. So it's really hard to say, this is what autism looks like. It does also include oftentimes sensory processing differences. So the way that they take in information, as well as the way they convey information out into the world. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And also executive functioning deficits. So there is oftentimes problems with becoming distracted, easily distracted usually, or sometimes there will be memory issues. And I'll talk about some of the accommodations that we use to support that. So yes, a lot of times people with neurodiversities have challenges. They experience challenges in the workplace because they're different and they don't take in information the same way other people do. They have expressive and receptive communication challenges. That's what I was talking about as far as they have trouble sort of interpreting the information that other people are conveying, and they also have trouble conveying information, oftentimes trouble talking about what they're feeling when they're communicating with other people. They definitely have difficulty fitting in. They behave in odd or unexpected ways. They tend to be quirky, and oftentimes conversation with them can be awkward. They sometimes miss feedback and instruction. So unless you are very specific, it's unwise to give general instruction to someone with autism. They don't know what to do next. So they're very literal and will take a direction, do exactly what is said and no more. And then they don't know where to go after that. And oftentimes don't do anything. So the fear of asking questions and feeling awkward or uncomfortable sort of prevents them from asking questions a lot of times. I mentioned the sensory sensitivities. That shows up in a lot of different ways. Food sense, every sense, from being affected to loud noises, bright lights, food sensitivities, heat and cold sensitivities, not wanting to be touched, not liking certain materials on their skin. And all of these things really just sort of play into a sense of being overwhelmed. That's oftentimes what people with sensory sensitivities experience, is just a sense of being overwhelmed. And they oftentimes appear unorganized because of those executive functioning deficits. Time management is sometimes an issue, organization in all different kinds of ways. And again, these things don't apply to everybody. These are typical things that you might see.
Hey, Marcia, just kind
Yes.
of going through some of those challenges and things that you brought up there. Jasmine put a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to just ask the question, Jasmine. It seems like a pretty good time to ask that question.
I don't see it.
Oh, you don't see it? Oh, it was just a question about are there some local businesses that stand out for their neurodiversity hiring and expertise? And what do you
Yes.
see businesses do when they are leading or when they when it comes to the retention side of things too?
So yeah, there are a number of local businesses that we work with that do a great job and seek out people with neurodiversities. SEI, Security Equipment Incorporated, I think maybe. The alarm company, SEI, is a good one. Warner Enterprises is another one. And, of course, Hy-Vee, they hire people with all sorts of disabilities, but they're very good at working with people with neurodiversities. What was the second part of that question, Stan?
What do you see businesses do when they are leading employers when it comes to the retention of individuals who are neurodiverse?
Oh, okay. Well, so what I can tell you there is people with autism, especially, but I would imagine with other neurodiversities as well, do not like change. So retention is usually higher with people with autism than it is with the other segment of the workforce. 90% was the last figure that I saw over a 5-year period. So I don't know what it is exactly, but I know that the people we work with don't like to change jobs. Even if we're encouraging them to take a step forward in their career, they would just rather stay put. So retention, I don't think, is necessarily an issue.
And then
Anything else?
Yeah, just one quick question. On one of the previous slides, you put that graphic up with the individual and all of the different things
Yep.
around that person's head. And you mentioned that was from the UK, right? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so just kind of wondering in general, like, are there countries that are better at identifying individuals on the autism spectrum, or worse, or how does that compare from country to country? I'm sure it's all over the place, right?
Well, absolutely. But yes, I think some countries are better than others. We know that some cultures are better than others. We, you know, think, it's all speculation. We don't necessarily know for sure at this point, but I think a lot of the lack of diagnosis in certain segments of the population is because of a fear of being stigmatized because of the diagnosis, or maybe they just see it more as a behavior problem rather than a disorder. So we know there's cultural issues, and therefore I would assume that applies to different cultures across the world as well. And yes, we know that I guess I can't speak to anything other than the UK and probably Australia as well. I think they're a little bit ahead of us in terms of really addressing autism and the treatment of autism and providing services, I guess, across all segments of the community. I think it's just really integrated more into their society than it is in ours. So, but that's what we're working on.
And then we did
Anything
have
else?
one question in the chat.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, this one's, are there industries or job duties that attract a higher percentage of people with neurodiversities? Do you see certain aspects of or positions that folks with ASD may thrive in even more than neurotypical folks?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I'm going to talk about that. Yep. So just a minute here. Okay. A little bit more what you might see an employee with autism spectrum disorder or someone who's neurodiverse. They traditionally avoid eye contact. They have processing delays. You might hear like a robotic voice tone, and they have difficulty with abstract concepts. So they are oftentimes uncomfortable during unstructured times and social interaction. They're thrown off by unplanned changes, don't really like changes at all. And they function better a lot of times with additional breaks, more short breaks rather than a couple of longer breaks, because it allows them time to sort of reset and escape that sense of just being overwhelmed a little bit. So a lot of times people that we work with, in fact, I would say the vast majority of the people that we work with have anxiety and or depression, and it's probably from years of being rejected, feeling like an outcast, being bullied, you know, from early on and up to and including the present day. They often feel like there's something wrong with them. They've been told there's something wrong with them. And so they have very low self-esteem and oftentimes experience anxiety or depression. So we're working with that as well as helping them sort of fit in at work, which can be challenging. So yes, getting to the point, the ability of autism, there are definitely strengths for people who have neurodiversities and autism, and positions that they're well suited for. So just in taking a look at some of the abilities, and again, this is typical, it doesn't apply to everyone, but they typically have a preference for routine. So anything that is repetitive and might drive other people crazy because of the repetition are oftentimes just the ticket for someone with autism. They can settle into a groove and oftentimes perform it more quickly and at a higher quality than your typical person. Oftentimes very detail oriented. I mentioned the pattern recognition and error detection. Those are things that usually, if someone has this propensity, those things jump right out at them. They are people who are very honest and authentic. They are not going to be ones, they're very literal. So they're not going to be ones to sort of play games or put on airs or pretend to be someone they're not. They just don't seem to have that ability and are therefore very honest sometimes. They can be too honest. But it's really refreshing because they're very authentic and delightful. I mean, when you get to know some of the people that we work with, I just find them to be delightful in their authentic, they're genuinely who they are. So they do tend to have a very strong work ethic and productivity. They are rule followers. So give me a good set of rules and I'm going to do exactly what you tell me. If this is the quota or the production expectation, I'm going to do that and more. They oftentimes end up being the subject matter experts because they are going to know the rules and the processes and the procedures inside and out. And they will be the people that others go to when they don't know the answer. How do I do this? Or what should I do when this happens? Oftentimes they do have intense concentration and can accomplish a lot in a short period of time. And I mentioned that that innovative thinking, they do have creative approaches to different problems. There's one employer that we worked with that said that his team had been working with a problem. They brought in one of our people as an intern. And like one of the first conversations they had about this problem, the person sort of pulled out, you know, a concept that they hadn't even considered that sort of led to them being able to make some movement on that problem. So just some, I don't want to go too much into this, but some statistics about autism. Somewhere around 1 million teenagers are going to enter adulthood here in the next decade. We think more than half of them, or more than half of the young adults with autism remain unemployed or unenrolled in higher education in the 2 years following high school. So, you know, and 80 to 90% of adults who've been diagnosed with autism are either unemployed or underemployed. And so, you know, that's really kind of what we're looking at with people with autism and their, I guess, involvement in the workforce or lack thereof. Yeah, and this is just really just kind of talking about the point here really is that technology is an area where people with neurodiversities and autism have both an interest and ability. And so there are lots of technical positions and also technology companies that seek people with autism. I mentioned SEI. The people that they employ are ones who are monitoring the security systems and cameras and doing sort of the behind the scene things with technology there. Werner is the same. They've got sort of the imaging and indexing and all of that they're doing with Werner and so forth. So technology seems to be an area where they have both the interest and the ability. And so this is a video that really just kind of demonstrates what happened at one of those companies that you might recognize in just a couple of minutes here. So we'll see if we can get this to work.
When I was diagnosed with autism, the psychologist explained it like there were very limited career capacity for me.
Before I came to Microsoft, I was struggling to get employment. I had these skills in math, but nobody was giving me interviews and it didn't seem to be going well. I worked a couple of minimum wage jobs. It was work, it paid the bills, but I definitely could feel that I was destined for something more.
I feel like I get to have a pretty significant impact on Microsoft.
By having people with disabilities in the fabric of our company, you're building in a diverse workforce that then represents the 1 billion people with disabilities out there. We're going to be building better products, we're going to be building better services, websites, anything that we do will work across the spectrum of being human.
And so every time we get an opportunity to bring somebody in who can see things from a different angle, every time that happens, that's where we find these great creative types who can come in and help us deliver the things that we care about.
I'm Cody Takeyoshi, and I'm a software engineer at Xbox Live.
My name is Joey Chemis, and I'm a data scientist here at Microsoft.
MJ Gardner, software engineer on Azure build pipelines and engineering systems.
There is just an incredibly high unemployment and underemployment rate when it comes to autism. A traditional hiring process, that's not going to allow someone with autism to show up and show their strengths.
For me, the autism hiring program was the chance to finally, make it. You're saying, here's the things that come with autism that the standard interview process would flag. Here's how we accommodate those issues and make them less of an issue. And here's how we allow the person to really shine and show their true colors and abilities.
I think this is just a better way of evaluating. This is just probably a better way for anyone.
People are looking for companies that reflect humanity. There is incredible talent out there in the marketplace that should be in our company.
This program has given me a mirror to reflect on the things that make me different, or how could I maybe change the way that I work in order to bring some of these experiences forward.
My hope for the future is that we won't see this as a program, but instead a natural way to recruit key talent in our organizations.
So if I was talking to a younger version of myself, I would let myself know that you're going to do really cool things and that you're going to major in math, you're going to really love it, and that you're going to end up getting a really cool job at Microsoft that you just enjoy. The people, the work, the type of problems that are being solved.
So to be here is just really cool. I'm very proud of where I am.
So Microsoft actually developed a playbook for individuals with autism. They have a hiring program, and there's other companies that they worked with to develop that as well. SAP is one, JP Morgan Chase. They work together after having learned that people with autism are uniquely talented for a lot of the functions that they have available. They developed a playbook, showing other companies how and why to hire people with neurodiversities. And so this is, I have a copy of it. I'd be happy to share it with anyone who would like to take a look at it. But this is a quote right out of that playbook: is the strategic value of hiring people with autism. They say individuals with autism contribute diversity of thought to the workforce and enhance the potential for innovation. So among other things, they tell you how to make an argument, a business argument for hiring people with autism. Some of the things that they experience, as I mentioned: reduced staff turnover, minimal costs for hiring and accommodations. The accommodations that we ask for are, a typical one would be, like I mentioned, the extra breaks, more short breaks during the day. Also checklists. I mean, having more information in writing so they have something to refer to rather than having to think on their own. Okay, after I do this, then what do I do? They just have it in writing in front of them and can follow along. Employers do experience increased productivity and innovation when they have people with neurodiversities. There's also, social responsibility and benefiting from the fact that many individuals will, frequent or will seek a company that hires people with autism or other disabilities if they have a choice, if they know about it. So it's a matter of making sure that people know that that is something that you're doing. And diversity and inclusion efforts increase the market shares. We know that employers experience something they say like 28% higher revenue, twice as much net income when they have diversity and inclusion programs. So about accommodations, I guess just real quick, I want to make sure I'm allowing time for questions too. Accommodating employees with neurodiversity. So this comes from the Job Accommodation Network, askjan.org. It comes right from their website. People with neurodiversities experience limitations. They do. The degree of limitation will vary among the individual. And not all people with neurodiversities need accommodations, while others may require only a few. So things to think about in terms of whether somebody needs an accommodation would be: what sorts of limitations are they experiencing? How do they affect the employee and the employee's job performance? What specific job tasks are problematic? And then how can those be addressed? What accommodations are available to reduce or eliminate those problems? And then once accommodations are in place, is it useful to meet with the employee to evaluate their effectiveness of the accommodations? Answer: yes. Do supervisory personnel and employees need training? Also probably yes. So oftentimes employees will not disclose out of that fear of stigma. And so really, I think it's good practice to consider these things with any employee who might be having some sort of limitation, because it's, and in fact, this might be a good time for that poll question that I forgot about, Stan, on neurodiversities.
All right, I just launched that poll question, so go ahead and take a second and answer it. The question is, what % of people are estimated to be neurodivergent? So you got 3 choices there: 2 to 5%, 15 to 20%, or 30 to 40%. Okay, most people are guessing 15 to 20%. What's the correct answer, Marcia?
So in the general population, it's 30 to 40%. 30 to 40% are considered to have at least one of those neurodiversities that was on that image earlier on. So ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, as well as autism and others. So 30 to 40% in the general population, 15 to 20% in the workforce. So, so technically, you're right. Technically, you're right. So yeah, that's when we are trained, we do training of police officers about recognizing autism with the people that they come across, because sometimes people with autism have meltdowns when they become overwhelmed, and that it looks scary a lot of times to people. And there's some sad stories that we could tell about that. But when we train them, we ask them to just consider, could this be autism when they encounter a situation? Could this interaction that I'm having be someone with autism? And I guess we would ask employers to do the same. When you have someone experiencing a limitation or an issue, could it be autism? Yeah. And so as far as accommodations, maybe I'll be able to advance it, maybe I won't.
Marcia, can you hear me?
What's that, Jasmine?
We have one question.
So it says, given the potential communication struggles, do you see advocates being brought in to assist in clear communication of needs?
That's a really good question. So yes, I can see that. That is a lot of what our staff does, and I'll do a little bit of a commercial if I have time, but that's the sort of accommodation that we provide. The support that we provide both the employer and the individual is really just sort of helping them understand each other. But here's some of it as far as communication with individuals on the spectrum. So recognizing it, know that they oftentimes have problem with eye contact. It's uncomfortable or even impossible sometimes for them to look someone in the face. But just know that they are, just know that they are listening, they understand, and they will remember. And you can test that. I have, and I know that to be true. They have issues with nonverbal communication and picking up on social cues. They aren't going to get body language or facial expressions. So if you're looking at your watch to let them know that you're late and you need to be somewhere, they're not going to pick up on that. So speak your intention. Outward expression, they do sometimes come across as being cold or distant, but it is because they process the world differently and oftentimes struggle to convey what they're feeling. They do interpret things literally. They do not tend to be able to read between the lines. So be very clear and direct in instruction and feedback. And then because of that executive functioning issue, they have delayed processing oftentimes. And so allow them some time to process. Sometimes conversations that we have, frequently we have to allow a few seconds after we ask the question to allow them to sort of take it in, process it, and formalize or formulate a response. So they do need time to process both what was said, and also they're trying to decode those nonverbals, those facial expressions and body language. They are trying to figure that out as well. And then talking. They do enjoy sharing information, sometimes too much. They oftentimes have very intense interests and will talk on and on about those things as long as someone's willing to listen. They can't tell that you're not interested. And so sometimes you just have to let them know, I have to be somewhere, or you know, we can talk about this later. They do have a problem with small talk. So starting conversations are not easy for them. And that's something that they can, a lot of times we have a mentor sort of go around and introduce them and sort of create the small talk for them. And that works a lot of times pretty well in the workplace. And then always consider the previous experience of somebody who's neurodiverse. They have likely felt rejected a lot of their life, excluded, ridiculed, bullied, all of that. And so all of that previous experience sort of builds up and creates hesitancy to ask questions and look stupid, and just a lot of fear and low self-esteem. So just keep that in mind. And then I want to just go through this too, and then maybe I'll stop and take questions or talk a little bit more. Best practices for people with neurodiversities. And I think really this is probably just for everyone. I think regardless of whether they're neurodiverse, consider recruiting, hiring, and onboarding practices. So one of the accommodations that we ask for when someone is interviewing, people with social communication issues do not shine in traditional interviews, especially with their processing delays, where it's going to take them some time to formulate a response. Then they start to feel awkward, then they might freeze up. So we oftentimes ask for either a working interview where they can just perform the job and you can sort of have an informal conversation with them during that time, or to get the interview questions ahead of time so that they aren't caught off guard and they have time to think through it and develop a good response. An objection I'll add that employers sometimes have as well, you know, that kind of gives them an advantage if they can think through it. These are honest people and authentic people. They are not going to give you a response that is not their own. Provide an inclusive and supportive environment that's conducive to disclosure. So a lot of the trouble that people have in the work environment is because they're afraid to let people know. When people know that someone has a neurodiversity, it explains a lot, and therefore it leads to people going, oh, that's an autism thing, or, you know, that's the ADHD thing. So if they know, they understand a lot of times. So that's why we recommend training for managers and co-workers, really everybody, to just encourage everyone to ask themselves, could this be autism? Clear and direct communication, especially in advance of any changes. Changes will sometimes cause panic in people with autism. So if you can give them a heads up that changes are coming, allow them time to process it, think through how they're going to react to that, the result will be much better for those people. Breaking down projects into manageable steps and providing checkpoints, checking in with them and making sure that they're, you know, giving them chunks of things to do at a time and making sure that things are getting done along the way. Checklists are something that we provide to just about everybody that has autism, everyone that we work with. Also a mentor or a go-to person, one person that they can be comfortable with and get to know, and who can sort of make the connections for them with other people, start conversations and so forth. That's really appreciated. And then just consider the ease of navigating the work site and the work site in general. You know, is it loud? Could the person wear noise canceling headphones while they're working? Are there bright lights that maybe could be, you know, we have covers on our lights that sort of tone down the intensity, and just be flexible in thinking and expectations. You know, we always tell our employers, don't have lower expectations. Make sure that you have standards and maintain those, and talk to us maybe about how we can help make sure that those expectations are being met. And then, of course, just to be mindful of mental health issues too that are so frequently experienced. And then just real quick, my commercial, Prosper Workforce Services, that's my program. We do help adult job seekers with autism find meaningful employment and help them to maintain that employment. We work with the employer and the individual on an ongoing basis. There is no exit point. We will support them for as long as they would like for us to. We do work with local businesses, not only to hire people with autism, but also providing training. We have evaluated job descriptions to see what sorts of things can be added or taken away for somebody who is on the spectrum, and also to talk about what kinds of accommodations might be helpful for them. And somebody asked about some of the companies. These are companies that we are currently working with or have worked with in the past. I see there are some that don't currently have one of our participants employed, but these folks are all have been valuable partners of ours and continue to be. And then just some resources, that Autism at Work Playbook. I'd be happy to send anybody a copy of that, but there is a link to it here. SAP also has something similar, and there's a website listed there. And then that Job Accommodation Network, they have something specifically for autism spectrum disorder and accommodations that can be made for each of the impairments that they might be experiencing. So I highly recommend checking out askjan.org. All right.
I was gonna mention, I did put a link to that playbook earlier on when you were talking about it, so that is in the chat if anybody wants to look at that.
Great, thank you.
There was one question here, and please continue to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A or raise your hand. Question from Kat here: is that only for officially diagnosed individuals, or is self-diagnosis welcome for the program that you're working with, Marcia?
Yeah, so for our program, we do ask for either a medical diagnosis or an IEP from when they were in high school. So the people that we work with need to have a high school diploma or a GED. If they had an IEP in school, we will accept that. If there's an autism indicator on there, it's not an official diagnosis, but we use the IEP as well. So yeah, and unfortunately, the wait to be evaluated for a diagnosis is 6 months to a year for adults.
One question I was thinking about, obviously we've got a lot of great employers that are part of this meeting, wanting to do the best that they can when it comes to the hiring process. You gave some great examples of ways to improve that hiring process with the, giving the individual the questions beforehand, maybe a working interview, but just thinking in general from the time that job is posted to the interview process to hiring the individual, are there 2 or 3 other takeaways that a business can come away with that of best practices of trying to be as inclusive as possible when hiring?
I mean, I think another thing I would throw out there is maybe just to give people options. I mean, I guess I would probably suggest offering maybe an in-person interview or Zoom. Maybe the person is more comfortable with one over the other. I would encourage them maybe to bring in whatever information they like. If they have written responses, like we have an individual who wants to take a list of questions and responses that he's written down to each interview with him, be open to that. As far as like the onboarding, I would say the best practice there is definitely to put someone with them as a mentor to sort of show them around, make them feel comfortable, someone who obviously is kind of accepting and understanding, but also to be the person who they can go to say, what do I do when this happens? Because they are afraid to ask questions, and having one trusted person would make a huge difference for them. And then I think everything that you can put in writing, and any sorts of checklists that you can put into place. I know if every workplace that I've ever had is always behind on getting processes and things in writing or updated, but it's so important for people with autism, especially, to be able to refer to a procedural manual or a list of written instructions. So everything that you can put in writing would be useful too.
And since you mentioned Zoom, I mean, Zoom has become all of our best friends and worst enemies like over the last couple of years. And so how has the pandemic and virtual meetings affected the work that you're doing?
I would say that it's, I think much like it's affected everyone else. I think that the people that we work with have no problem with use of Zoom. And in fact, I think oftentimes prefer virtual meetings to in-person meetings. They're just more comfortable in their, a familiar environment, and, feel a sense of protection when they're not sitting face to face with someone. So I think it's really sort of enhanced the experience for them. So for the people we work with, though, we still make them uncomfortable because that's what you have to do when you are trying to get someone to grow and move them out of their comfort zone, as we force them to come in and talk with us to get them used to that. But yeah, they're doing well. They're doing well in this environment.
Any other final questions from anybody? We'll keep the chat open for another couple minutes here. Yeah, anything else you wanted to add, Marcia, as we wait to see if any other questions roll in?
I mean, I guess I would just add that, really to consider some of the things that we've talked about and like who wouldn't benefit from this? What employee wouldn't benefit from some of these suggestions and some of the accommodations that were mentioned? And really just, I would invite everyone to consider, I have lots of information that you can share with your employees if you don't want to have somebody come in and do a formal training. There's lots of information that we have about communicating with people on the spectrum, managing people on the spectrum, how to interview people who are on the spectrum. So I'd be more than happy to share any of that. And, I guess, and again, I guess I'll just say that, understanding what you're seeing and what it looks like leads to acceptance, and acceptance is what makes a more inclusive workplace.
That's awesome. Yeah, so it looks like we don't have any additional questions. So just want to thank Marcia for your time. I know that I learned a lot. I think everybody learned a lot. So this has been fantastic. Thank you again. And please come back and join us for one of our upcoming business workshops. We do them every third Thursday of each month. Got some great topics coming up. So we hope to see you again soon. But thank you, Marcia.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.